Let's start. So for today, we'll be discussing Module 5, which covers sampling. So from the word sample, sinabing sample, this is only a certain part of a whole. Sample nga lang siya, representative lang siya. Tulad nito, the nature of sampling. So sampling is the process of choosing a representative portion of a population or some elements in a population that will represent the entire population. So if we have a whole population, hindi naman lahat ng miyembro ng populasyon na yon ay magko-conduct tayo ng study, bibigyan natin ng questionnaire o i-interviewin natin silang lahat. Hindi ganun. Kaya nga sample lang, parte lang nun. Para makuha natin yung, kumbaga, naririnig nga natin sa balita, yung pulso nung majority. Okay? It is assumed that the characteristics of the chosen elements, yung mga sample ninyo, reflect the characteristics of the entire population. Yung mga katangian daw nung sample ninyo ay nagre-representa na sa katangian ng buong populasyon. Kaya there is no need to conduct the study to collect data from all members of the population. Sa sample lang. In contrast, total enumeration or census requires the study of all elements in the population. You might have heard of census. Ito yung mga pumupunta sa bahay ninyo, tinatanong kung ilan yung members o kung ilan yung mga nakatira doon sa bahay ninyo. Pag ganong study kasi, kailangan talaga lahat. Wala kang lalagpasan. Kung ikaw yung nagsisensus, wala kang lalagpasan na bahay kasi kailangan mo talagang malaman yung actual na bilang ng mga miyembro ng community, yung actual na bilang ng populasyon. Unlike in researches, we always conduct sampling. Kukuha nga lang tayo ng representative portion ng buong populasyon. So in the study of sampling, it is important to distinguish the following concepts. So population, target population, sampling frame, and sample. So ano yung population? This refers to the total number of elements. Your elements may be items, objects, areas, or individuals to be studied. For example, in the study of sexual attitudes and practices of students in public high school in Province A, all students in public high school in the province constitute the study population. Okay. Again, pag sinabi nating population, yung lahat, yung kabuuhan. Sabi nga dyan sa study, sexual attitudes and practices of students in public high schools. Ang population mo, yung mga estudyante sa public high school, doon sa province A. Lahat. Sila yung population mo. Okay? Pag sinabi namang population element, this pertains to an item, an object, an area, or an individual on which data will be taken. It is considered the unit of study. In the example above, a student in a public high school is a population element. Yung estudyante, population element siya. Kung sino yung makapagbibigay sa'yo ng data. Kung kanino mo makukuha yung data, siya yung population element. Okay, target population. This is the population for which representative information is desired. And then, sampling population. This is the population from which a sample is actually drawn. Kung saan ka kukuha nung mga, kung kanino mo kukunin yung data mo, kung kaninong specific na tao na. Sampling frame. The frame is a list of all the elements or sampling units. For example, the items or the persons in a population. The sample is drawn from the sampling frame. Ano yung sample? So sample, this refers to an individual, an element, or a group of individuals or elements on which information is obtained. The sample is drawn from a population to which research results are generalized. Okay, so papaano ginagawa yung ganitong study? For example, balik tayo dun sa sample natin kanina. Ito. Sexual attitudes and practices of students in public high schools in Province A. Yung population mo, yung lahat ng estudyante. Ito, yung students in public high school. Silang lahat. Sila yung population mo. Yung population element, siya yung public high school student. Okay, kumbaga nag-qualify siya para maging parte ng study mo dahil student in a public high school siya doon sa probinsyang yon. Target population, yung representative information. Yung population for which representative information is desired, kung saan mo kukunin yung representative information mo. Okay, for example, sabi mo ay siguro mas makakakuha ka ng data kapag taglay niya itong mga ganitong characteristics. For example, student, ganito kasi 'di ba? May tinatawag tayong scope and delimitation. Yung iba sa inyo gumawa na nun. Right? Di ko pa naturo. Ang galing nga eh. Scope and delimitation. Pag sinabi yun, ito yung sakop. At kung hanggang saan lang ang kukunin ninyo. For example, ang kukunin lang natin, estudyante ng public high school sa Province A. Pero ang mga kukunin lang natin ay yung mga 16 to 18 years old, for example. So sila yung target population. 16 to 18 years old na walang sakit, na hindi buntis, na walang disabilities, ay sila yung magiging target population mo. Okay? Magbabase ka doon sa scope and delimitation mo. Yun yung magiging target population. Kasi sabihin natin, may high school na 13 years old. Parte siya ng population mo. Parte din, siya ay population element din. Pero hindi siya parte ng target population mo. Kasi nga, hindi siya pasok doon sa characteristics or doon sa criteria na kailangan mo doon sa study mo. Okay, yun yung target population. Sampling population ay yung actual na pagkukuhanan mo ng sample mo. For example, dun sa high school na yon, sa lahat ng public high school sa Province A, merong, for example, 1,000 na pasok doon sa characteristics na hinahanap mo. Pasok doon sa criteria na hinahanap mo. 1,000 yon, lahat sila tatanungin mo. Hindi rin. Mula doon sa 1,000, kukuha ka ng representative. At yung mga representative na yon, yun yung sampling population mo. Okay? Sampling frame, the frame is a list of all elements or sampling units. Yung mga, kumbaga, listahan, yung mga kailangan mo para mag-qualify doon sa doon sa study mo. Okay? Kaya nga sabi dyan, listahan ng lahat ng elements or sampling units. Ano yung mga kino-consider mo para maging part sila ng study mo? Ano ang qualifications para maging isang sample? Okay? And then yung sample, yung actual na magiging parte ng study mo. Okay? So kung sabihin natin, target population, 1,000. Tapos yung kukunin mo lang na sampling population, 300 for example. Tapos yung bawat isa doon sa 300 na yon ay yung sample mo. Okay? Yun yan. Okay, so why is there a need to study a sample? So there are several advantages of studying a sample rather than the total population. Mas mainam na mag-conduct ka na lang ng sampling kesa yung buong populasyon ang pagkukuhanan mo ng data mo. Studying a sample is generally cheaper. Of course, mas konti, mas tipid. Mas mabilis din dahil mas konti, mas makukuha mo ng mabilis yung resulta, yung data mo. And yields more accurate results than conducting enumeration. Mas makakakuha ka ng matinong matinong data kumpara sa kapag kinuha mo yung buong populasyon. Mas accurate kasi kapag ganito. So, doon tayo sa una, it is cheaper. Since a sample is smaller than the entire population, collection, processing of data, therefore, cost much less. So, for example, doon sa sample natin na study kanina, sabi, di ba, students in public high schools in province A. So, sa buong probinsya yon, province A, di ba? Gawin na lang natin Pampanga. So, buong Pampanga, ang pagkukuhanan mo. So, lahat ng public school sa buong Pampanga ang pagkukuhanan mo ng data. Pero, since magsasampling ka, kukunti na lang. O, di mas tipid. Diba? Yung biyahe mo, yung pag-print mo ng mga questionnaire, yung memory kung magre-record ka. Diba? Yung papel na gagamitin mo sa pagte-take down ng notes, mas konti at therefore mas tipid. Okay? It is also faster. It is definitely quicker to study fewer individuals or elements than an entire population. So for example, kada 50 samples mo, inaabot ka ng 10 hours. For example, so kung 10 hours ang 50 at kung 300 yan, ilan yun? Ilan? Kung 50 samples for 10 hours, kung 300 yan, 60 hours lahat, di ba? Pero kung gagawin mong 1,000, yung buong population, kukunin mo, mas matagal. Okay? Next, it is more accurate. Fewer errors are expected in data collection and processing in a study of a sample than in a study of the entire population. Take note, there is an acceptable margin of error. Ibig sabihin, may katanggap-tanggap na pagkakamali. Pero kung ang pagkakamali ay, kunyari, 50%, that's unacceptable. Kalahati, mali. So, walang kwenta yung research mo kapag ganun. Okay. The study of a sample allows for a more thorough investigation, better supervision, and better handling of data than is possible with complete coverage. Mas madali talaga kapag nag-take ka lang ng sample. Mas tama pa siya. Mas mabilis, di ba? It can yield more comprehensive information. A small sample can be more thoroughly investigated and can yield more comprehensive information than a big population. Kasi mas natutukan mo siya dahil konti nga lang sila. Kumpara sa madami sila, ang goal mo na lang doon pag madami, gusto mo na lang matapos eh. Ayaw mo nang, or baka hindi ka na maging interesadong makuha kung ano yung actual. May ganung tendency. Kaya, at mas makapagbibigay din ng maayos na information yung samples mo kung mas konti sila. Okay? So there are two basic types of sampling, non-probability sampling and probability sampling. When we say non-probability sampling, it is arbitrary and is generally subjective. Data gatherers choose sample cases as they wish or whatever they find. So kung sinong nandyan, kung sinong pwede, kung sinong trip, yun yung non-probability sampling. Probability sampling naman is based on the concept of random selection, a procedure that assures that all elements in the population are given equal chances of being selected as a sample. Probability. So, lahat ng mga nasa target population mo ay may probability na mapili para maging parte ng study mo. Kasi nga random, hindi natin alam. Hindi katulad sa non-probability, tukoy na kung sino ang mga magiging parte ng study mo. Sa probability, hindi specific kung sino. Kasi nga, random selection siya. Non-probability sampling is judgmental sampling. It does not provide every member of the population an equal chance of being selected as part of the sample. Kasi nga, again, tukoy na kung sino ang magiging part ng study mo. So, hindi lahat may tsansa na maging parte ng study kasi nga may naisip ka na kung sino. Okay? Moreover, the probability or chance of an element to be chosen as a sample is unknown. One disadvantage of choosing this sample is the possibility of bias. Baka hindi maging tama ang resulta ng study mo kasi nga kilala mo na o naitukoy mo na kung sino yung magiging part ng study mo. A bias is the greater probability of certain class of sample to be included in the selected sample. The conclusion derived from a non-probability sample is limited to the sample itself. Okay. Okay. For example, gusto mo mag-conduct ng study na yung mga nagpa-sex change. So, hindi sila ganun kadami, di ba? Tapos, dahil taga Pampanga ka, yung mga nagpa-sex change sa Pampanga lang ang kilala mo. Wala kang kilala sa ibang lugar. So, yun na nga, magiging tukoy kung sino yung mga magiging parte ng study mo. Pag ganun kasi, there is a possibility of bias. Sabi natin may 10 kang kilalang nagka-qualify para dun sa study mo. Pero dahil mas close ka dun sa 5, sila na lang yung pinili mo. Yung 5. So, there is a chance na magkaroon ng bias. Dahil sa tingin mo, for example, ito yung 2 resulta na pwede mong makuha mula sa study mo, positive, negative. At gusto mo yung resulta ng study mo maging positive. So, pipiliin mo yung samples mo na sa tingin mo ang sagot nila, magli-lean towards yung positive na result. Ganon. So, again, there is a possibility of bias. Pero hindi naman natin sinasabi na sa lahat ng ganito na research ay mayroon bias. Hindi naman. Nasabi lang, may possibility. Okay? There are 2 common ways to choose persons or elements to include a non-probability sample, accidental and purposive methods. Accidental sampling. In accidental sampling, the investigator selects the sample units as they become available. So kung sino ang pwede sa pagkakataon na to, sige ikaw, sali ka na sa study ko. Ganun, accidental. Unlike in purposive sampling, in this type of sampling, the investigator uses a specific purpose in selecting the sample. Meron kang specific na gusto. Meron ka ng specific na gusto, kaya pipili ka sa mga magiging qualified doon. Probability sampling techniques naman, there are several ways of drawing probability samples. There are 5 most common techniques used are simple random sampling, systematic sampling with a random start, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and multistage sampling. Okay? Dito na tayo sa ikalawa ha, probability sampling na tayo. First is simple random sampling. Simple random sampling is a process of selecting sample cases from a population, giving all the sampling units equal chances of being included as a sample. Simple random sampling may be done by drawing of lots, bunutan, or with the use of a table of random digits. So drawing of lots, pieces of paper on which the names or symbol of each element of the population is written, is placed in a container and mixed. Then the desired number of elements is drawn either with replacement or without replacement. Literal na drawing of lots. For example, nagsulat ka ng 20 na pangalan, tapos nag-draw lots ka, kumuha ka dun ng 5, tapos sila yung i-interviewin mo. Okay, so yun. This is simple random sampling. Okay. Using table of random digits naman, a table of random digits is a table containing randomly arranged numbers in columns and in rows. From a random start, numbers within the total of population are drawn in a particular direction until the desired number of samples are selected. The study sample will constitute the elements represented by the numbers or symbols drawn. So random sampling may be unrestricted, so with replacement, or restricted without replacement. Pag 'Di ba nag-draw lots? Pag sinabing restricted, kung sino yung nabunot mo, hindi mo pwedeng palitan. Pag sinabing unrestricted, hindi naman masyadong mahigpit ang restrictions niya. So kapag may nabunot ka, pwede mong palitan. Okay. Restricted type, after drawing a sample, the chosen element is returned to the container before the next sample element is selected. Unrestricted type, a chosen element is not replaced. Sorry, baliktad yan. Unrestricted itong una. And then restricted itong ikalawa. Okay? So, unrestricted, chosen element is returned to the container. Di ba? May nabunot ka na. Tapos binalik mo doon sa container. Tapos bumunot ka ulit. Yun yung unrestricted. Sa restricted naman, a chosen element is not replaced. Yung nabunot mo, siya na yun. Di mo na pwedeng palitan. In most cases, however, random sampling is done without replacement. Because in sampling with replacement, the same element may be drawn several times. So nga naman, di ba? Pag unrestricted, binalik mo yung papel, tapos bumunot ka ulit, of course, there is a chance na mabunot mo siya ulit. Eh di ibabalik mo lang ulit, di ba? Walang ulit-ulit ka lang. Mapapagod ka lang, sayang lang yung oras mo. Okay, eto yun. Sa numbers na tinutukoy kanina. Step 1, make a list of the students and give them a corresponding number from 1 to 25. Assume that the names of the students are the alphabet. So dito. So kunyari, ito si for example, si A si Bautista, si B si Basa, si C si Campos, si D si Makasil, si E si Suplito. For example lang. So kayo ay may ibibigay na number na corresponding number. Tapos yung mga numbers nyo, ito. Write a number on a small piece of paper and roll it. After writing all the numbers, place the rolled pieces of paper in a container. So yung mga numbers, ilagay mo lang sa container, alugin mo yung container, tapos bumunot ka. Kung sino yung mabunot mo, siya na yung magiging part ng study mo. Ayun, kunwari, nabunot ko si nabunot ko number 2. So, si Basa. Nabunot ko rin number 3. So, si Campos. Yun yung mga magiging part ng study ko. Okay? Next type of probability sampling is systematic sampling with a random start. So, systematic sampling with a random start is a method of selecting a sample from a population by taking the Kth units from an ordered population from the first unit which is selected at random. The K is called the sampling interval. The sampling interval is derived by dividing the total population by the desired sample size. To use this technique, an ordered list of population elements is required. Okay, so how do you do that? So you have to make a list. Okay, an ordered list of population elements. Ilalagay mo na lahat. And then, yung sampling interval ay magagawa mo kapag hinati mo yung total population. Okay, yun yung sampling interval. Next is stratified random sampling. It is the process of selecting a random sample from subgroups or strata into which a population has been subdivided. A population is made up of groups of elements with varied characteristics, which can possibly affect observations and responses. The population is stratified into more or less homogeneous subgroups or strata before sampling is done. From each subgroup, a subsample is drawn either using simple random sampling or systematic sampling with a random start. Nagets nyo yun? Ganito. Ito yung buong population. Sa buong population, may mga grupo. Sabi natin may 3 grupo. Yan, 3 grupo. Yung 3 grupo na yon, of course, may iba't ibang mga elements, may iba't ibang characteristics na maaaring maging makaapekto doon sa magiging sagot dun sa makukuha mong data. So, ang gagawin mo, yung grupo na yon, igugrupo mo sila sa more or less homogeneous responses. More or less homogeneous subgroups or strata. Magkakaparehas na sila ng characteristics. And then, yung magkakaparehas na characteristics na yun yung kukuhanan mo ulit ng sample. Gets nyo? From the whole, tapos may grupo. Yung isang grupo, ginrupo mo sa homogeneous subgroups, and then, kumuha ka doon ng sample mula doon sa nagrupo mong homogeneous subgroups or strata. That is stratified random sampling. Cluster sampling is a method of selecting a sample of groups or cluster of elements. Cluster are usually exclusive subpopulations which together comprise a population. Each cluster consists of heterogeneous elements and each is typical of the population. For instance, in a school where students in each grade level are assigned to heterogeneous rather than homogeneous sections, each section is considered a cluster. Okay? Boy Scout troops in public school and YMCA clubs are examples of clusters. Ulitin natin ha. Each cluster consists of heterogeneous elements. So, yung grupo ay magkakaiba sila ng katangian. Remember, sa stratified sampling, ginrupo mo sila into homogeneous. Homo means one. Ibig sabihin, iisang katangian. Lahat ng mga pangit pinagsama-sama mo. O yun, homogeneous yun. Pag heterogeneous naman, pangit at saka maganda at saka mga gwapo. Yun, magkakasama sila. Okay, so the number of clusters in a population represents the size of the population of clusters, while the number of elements in a cluster is called cluster size. Okay, the sample cluster can be drawn using simple random sampling or systematic sampling with a random start. Multistage sampling. So in multistage sampling, the selection of the sample is accomplished into two or more stages. Kaya nga siya multistage. Ibig sabihin, dalawa ang minimum na stage o higit pa. Then the population is first divided into a number of first stage units from which a sample is drawn. Population. Hinati mo into first stage unit. Doon, sa first stage na yun, kumuha ka ng sample. Then, the population is drawn in the sample stages units are divided into second stage. So, yung nakuha mo doon sa first stage, hatiin mo ulit para doon na sa iyong second stage. More stages may be added if desired by dividing the population into a hierarchy of sampling units corresponding to the different sampling stages. This process is usually used when the population can be divided into hierarchies, the process in which hierarchy is considered one stage. Okay. And last is the determination of sample size. Paano mo tutukuyin kung gaano kadami ang kukunin mo, kung gaano kadami. It's important ay kung gagawin mo siyang case study na yung talambuhay lang nung isang tao na yon ang pag-aaralan mo o kung iilan lang sila, pwede yun. Pero depende nga kasi sa klase ng study mo. Okay. Meron pa yung biktima daw ng cybercrime. O ilan na ba ang nabiktima ng cybercrime? At aling cybercrime? Kasi madaming uri ng cybercrime. Kaya, kung maalala ninyo, hindi naman porket nagpasa kayo ng topic ninyo or ng title ninyo, agad-agad okay na yun. Kasi, although, yung iba kasi, di ba, umaasa lang naman sa kopya. Kaya nga, di ba, yung mga sinubmit nyo, kopya lang naman. Iniba nyo lang yung title, tapos pinalitan nyo yung ibang data. Style nyo eh, no? Yun. Hindi kasi ibig nga sabihin na okay na yun, ay, o nagbigay na kayo ng topic, approve siya agad. Kasi nga, madami tayong kino-consider. Okay. So, it should be, the sample size should be large enough. Bakit? To allow a reliable analysis. Kung dalawa lang ang tatanungin mo, magiging sapat kaya? Magiging tama kaya ang resulta ng research mo? Hindi. Kasi kung dalawa lang, magiging opinion lang yan, di ba? Remember, population, madami. Kukuha ka ng representative doon sa population mo. Yun nga yung magiging sample size mo. Kung yung sample size mo sobrang liit, magiging representative kaya siya? Mare-represent niya kaya yung characteristics ng majority? Hindi siguro. Okay, ikalawa, to provide for desired levels of accuracy in estimates. Kailangan kasi nga maging accurate siya. So, kailangan ng malaking sample size. And to enable the researcher to test for the significance of differences between proportions. If resources are inadequate, hindi sapat, to obtain a sufficient sample size, the researcher must obtain more resources or revise the plans for data analysis. Yun yung magiging remedyo mo. Kung kulang ang makukuhanan mo ng data, kung kulang ang magiging sample mo para sumapat doon sa dapat na sample size, ano daw ang kailangan mong gawin? Humanap ka pa daw. The researcher must obtain more resources or palitan mo yung plano mo. Humanap ka ng mapagkukuhanan ng data na iba or papalitan mo yung plano mo for data analysis. There are two important considerations in determining the sample size of the study. Availability of resources. Remember, may mga tinanong din ako sa inyo. Gusto nyong mag-interview ng mga nabiktima ng sexual violence. Anong tanong ko? Papayag kaya silang magpa-interview? Diba? Kaya nga, i-check mo yan, availability of resources. May tanong pa ako sa iba. Bibigyan kaya kayo ng data ng police? Bibigyan kaya kayo ng data ng munisipyo? Diba? Gusto nyong malaman, merong isa sa inyo, gusto niyang malaman yung pangalan ng mga bata na gumawa ng krimen. Pwede ba yun? Diba? Kasi nga, kung naituro na yan sa juvenile delinquency ninyo, hindi kayo basta-basta nakakakuha ng personal information involving children. Either from the DSWD or sa PNP o kahit saan, hindi ka basta-basta makakakuha ng pangalan o ng detalye ng mga bata. Ang gusto pa nung kaklase ninyo, kunin niya yung address. Kasi i-interviewin niya yung mga bata. So, paano niya i-interviewin? Kailangan puntahan niya, di ba? So, kung pupuntahan niya, kailangan niya rin yung address. Kukunin niya na yung pangalan, kukunin niya pa yung address. Kaya ang tanong ko sa kanya, hindi ibibigay kaya yun sa'yo? Di ba? Hindi magiging available yung resource mo kapag gano'n. Then, the requirements of a proposed plan. Kasi kung gaano kadami o kung ilan ang magiging sapat para doon sa research mo. The sample size can be determined by using a sampling formula. To calculate the sample size required for accuracy in estimating proportions, for example, it is important to first to answer the following questions. So una, what are the reasonable estimates of key proportions to be measured in the study? Parang, if this is the population, ilan kaya yung sapat? Kunyari, merong 1,000,000 na Pilipino na qualified doon sa study mo. Kung kumuha ka kaya ng 5, sapat na yon? Tingin nyo? 'Di ba? Reasonable kaya yung 5? Baka naman yung 5 nakuha mo puro isolated cases pa, 'di ba? Kaya nga kailangan makuha mo yung sapat, yung proportion para maging representative ng buong population. Next, what degree of accuracy do you want to have or how far can you allow your sample estimates key proportions to deviate from the true proportions in the population as a whole? Again, sabi ko nga sa inyo, may acceptable na margin of error. May mga pagkakataon kasi na hindi mo naman talaga makukuha yung mga data na gusto mo mula lang sa iilan na sample. Kaya ang tanong, ano yung degree of accuracy? Ano yung gusto mong porsyento na makuha na tama, na accurate para doon sa study mo? Okay? What confidence level do you want to use? How confident do you want to be that your sample estimate is as accurate as you wish? Confidence level yung tiwala ka nga na itong sample size mo ay makapagbibigay ng mga sagot para makuha mo yung tamang data para doon sa research mo. And what is the size of the population that the sample is supposed to represent? Siyempre sa una, alamin mo na ilan ba yung population mo. Katulad nun sa research ko nung masters ko, sa thesis ko. Dahil ang research ko ay college student sa buong Angeles. Yun. Buong Angeles City. So, inalam ko, lahat, pinuntahan ko isa-isa yung mga schools na merong college. I think 8 ata yun or 9 na schools. Pinuntahan ko yung isa-isa. Tinanong ko kung ilan yung student population nila ng college. So, I think parang may around parang 8,000 ata lahat-lahat sa buong Angeles, yung college. Kung hindi ako nagkakamali, kung tama yung memory ko. So, yun yung buong population. Hindi ko naman pwede tanungin yung iba doon. Yung iba doon drop na, di ba? Siyempre, yung sa registrar, meron lang sila yung actual na bilang ng enrolled. Pero hindi naman yung actual na bilang ng pumapasok. So, ilan doon? Yun yung kailangan ko malaman, yung kabuuhan. Yung figure na yun, yung 8,000. Kailangan mo rin yun malaman. Okay? Questions?